The courtroom door creaks open, and all eyes turn to him, Kody Brown, the patriarch of a family tangled in secrets, lies, and betrayals no one saw coming. Today isn't just another family feud, it's a showdown that could change everything. How far would a family go to protect its secrets, and who will crack under the pressure? Stay with me, because this story isn't over yet. The room smells of polished wood and anxiety. The fluorescent lights overhead hum softly, but it does nothing to drown out the tension. Kody Brown sits rigidly at the defendant's table, his hands clasped tightly, knuckles whitening. Across the room, Robin fidgets, her foot tapping against the floor in a silent rhythm of nervous energy, while Christine and Janelle exchange sharp glances, each measuring the other, the judge and the silent crowd of spectators, like pieces on a chessboard. Mary sits slightly apart, quiet, her lips pressed together as though trying to keep herself from saying something that could shatter the room. The bailiff calls the courtroom to order. The judge's gaze sweeps over the room, pausing at Kody. "We are here today to address serious allegations concerning family misconduct and financial mismanagement," he announces, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. The words hang in the air, almost unbearable, and you can feel the collective intake of breath from everyone present. Robin leans forward, her voice shaking slightly as she speaks. "Your Honor, I just want the truth to come out. This has been tearing us apart for years. My children deserve clarity." Christine clears her throat, her posture stiff, her expression betraying a mix of anger and fear. And yet it seems that some members of this family have been hiding behind smiles, pretending that everything is fine while everything is falling apart behind closed doors. Her words cut like a knife, and Kody shifts in his seat, the first crack in his composed facade. The prosecution rises, papers rustling in a symphony of tension. "Your Honor, we intend to present evidence of financial discrepancies, manipulative behaviors, and coercion that have directly impacted not only the children, but the entire family structure. What we have here is a case that could redefine how this family functions, legally and emotionally." At this moment, the camera lens of the mind drifts to the gallery. The children, sitting quietly with their mother, exchange glances filled with confusion and fear. This isn't just about Kody or his wives. This is about the ripple effects that touch everyone in the family, every whispered conversation, every secret kept too long. You think you know family drama, but nothing could prepare you for what's about to unfold. The first witness is called, an accountant who's worked with the family for years. She adjusts her glasses and steps up to the stand, her eyes scanning the courtroom. "Over the past 5 years," she begins, "I've noticed a series of transactions that are unusual. Some of these are personal expenses coded as family necessities. Others are large transfers with no documentation. I have compiled a full report." Kody swallows hard. Robin bites her lip. Christine's jaw tightens, and Janelle shifts uncomfortably in her seat. The witness continues, each word heavy with implication, each fact another brick in the wall of suspicion building around Kody. The tension is palpable. Every whisper, every cough echoes like thunder in the courtroom. As the session progresses, the evidence begins to mount. Contracts, invoices, even screenshots of private messages, all painting a picture of deception and manipulation. The children shift in their seats, sensing the storm of emotion surrounding them. The courtroom is no longer just a place of law. It's a stage for the unraveling of a family. Kody exhales slowly, trying to maintain composure, though the cracks in his calm demeanor are visible. "Your Honor, I did what I thought was best for my family. Every decision was made with love. I never intended to harm anyone." His voice falters, revealing the pressure mounting from every direction. Christine whispers under her breath, a barely audible edge of accusation. "Best for who?" The air thickens, heavy with anticipation. Every person in the courtroom knows this is only the beginning. Secrets will be exposed, alliances tested, and hearts broken. And as the first day of testimony draws to a close, one thing becomes clear. In this family, no one is safe from the truth. You won't believe what comes next. The next witness is about to reveal a secret that could shatter the family forever. The bailiff calls a recess, but the tension doesn't lift. In the hallways, whispers fill the air. What will the next session uncover? Who will stand loyal, and who will crumble? Outside the courtroom, cameras flash, capturing every fleeting emotion. The fear, the anger, the betrayal. It's a war of loyalty and truth, and the stakes couldn't be higher. And just when everyone thinks they've seen the worst, a mysterious document is handed to the prosecution, one that promises to change the entire narrative. No one knows what's inside, but the moment the envelope is opened in front of the judge, the courtroom collectively holds its breath. The courtroom reconvenes, the air thick with anticipation, and the tension seems almost tangible as every person takes their seat, aware that the next testimony could shift the balance of this already fragile family dynamic. Kody sits with his hands clasped tightly on the table, eyes darting briefly toward each of his wives, his usually composed demeanor now showing subtle signs of strain, while Robin fidgets, her fingers intertwined nervously, her gaze flicking between Kody and the prosecution, the fear and hope mingling in her expression, as if silently begging for a resolution that might never come. Christine, sitting upright, radiates defiance and suspicion, her eyes narrowing as she anticipates every word, every piece of evidence that will be laid bare, knowing that the Janelle, appearing tense and almost brittle, shifts uncomfortably in her seat, whispering to herself intermittently, while Mary remains quiet, her hands folded on her lap, staring straight ahead with a distant, almost haunted expression, like she's bracing herself for the impact of revelations she both fears and expects. The judge clears his throat and calls the session to order, his voice calm but authoritative, slicing through the murmurs that ripple across the gallery, and he motions to the prosecution to begin their questioning of the next witness, a longtime family employee who has recently come forward with claims that could dismantle years of carefully constructed family narratives. The witness steps forward, adjusting the microphone, her hands shaking slightly as she holds a folder thick with documents, and she begins to recount events that paint a troubling picture of secrecy, manipulation, and covert financial dealings, describing transactions that were misrepresented, expenditures that were hidden, and instances where emotional coercion seems to have been employed to maintain the family hierarchy. And as she speaks, the camera of the imagination lingers on Kody, whose face tightens with each revelation, a mixture of defensiveness and growing panic flickering across his features, while Robin's eyes well up with tears, caught between loyalty, fear, and the desperate hope that the truth might finally bring some clarity and protection for her children. Christine leans slightly forward, whispering to herself in sharp, bitter tones, dissecting each word as though she were both jury and judge, while Janelle sits rigid, her mind racing with what these revelations mean for her own position in the family. And Mary's lips press into a thin line, her mind replaying moments that suddenly feel distorted and contaminated by betrayal. And the courtroom itself seems to contract around them, the walls echoing the tension, and overhead lights casting harsh shadows that accentuate the strain on every face, as if the room itself is conspiring to amplify every crack in their composure. The witness produces bank statements, email exchanges, and text messages, each one a dagger in the narrative carefully presented to the public, exposing instances of favoritism, financial mismanagement, and covert agreements that bypass traditional transparency. And as the prosecution lays out the evidence, the gallery murmurs, the air vibrating with disbelief and curiosity, and Kody shifts, attempting to maintain composure, yet the subtle twitch in his jaw betrays his anxiety, while Robin reaches for a tissue, dabbing her eyes, unable to mask the emotional toll of hearing long-hidden details that now confirm suspicion she had long feared but could never prove. The judge leans forward slightly, steepling his fingers, observing each reaction with a keen, analytical eye, his tone measured yet probing, asking Kody to explain his knowledge and involvement. And Kody responds with a voice that wavers, attempting calm rationalizations, insisting that his intentions were always for the family's benefit, yet every word seems to collide with the mounting evidence, creating a dissonance that the courtroom can almost taste, thick and heavy in the air. Christine interrupts at one point, her tone sharp, almost cutting through the formalities of the courtroom, challenging the inconsistencies in Kody's testimony, her voice carrying both accusation and hurt, demanding accountability for actions that have rippled through their family for years, while Janelle subtly shifts her weight, visibly torn between confrontation and restraint, as though she fears unleashing emotions that might spiral beyond control. Mary finally exhales, her voice quiet but piercing, adding details that shed light on emotional manipulation and favoritism, revealing how decisions were made that affected children's lives, their schooling, and their safety. And as she speaks, Robin's hands tremble slightly, holding the edge of the table, while Kody's eyes widen imperceptibly, realizing that the narrative is shifting in ways he cannot fully control, that the protective walls he built around his image are crumbling under scrutiny. The courtroom pauses as the prosecution introduces a series of private messages between Kody and his wives, messages that reveal moments of tension, deception, and persuasion that were previously hidden. And as the judge examines them closely, his eyebrows knit in concentration. The atmosphere grows even more charged, the weight of years of secrecy pressing down on everyone. each person in the room acutely aware that every reaction, every glance, and every gesture could become part of the public record, part of the narrative that will follow them long after the gavel falls. Outside the courtroom, whispers spread rapidly, the media picking up fragments of the unfolding drama, broadcasting interpretations and speculation. Yet inside, the emotional stakes are far more intimate and painful, every revelation cutting deeper into the fabric of trust that held the family together. And the tension oscillates between moments of silent reflection and explosive confrontation. As Robin quietly sobs, Christine's voice grows sharp with indignation. Janelle braces herself in a defensive posture, and Mary maintains a cold, calculating distance, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and a kind of grim vindication. As the day stretches on, new witnesses step forward, former employees, family friends, and even a distant relative, each adding pieces to a puzzle that grows increasingly complex and dark, exposing not only financial discrepancies, but emotional manipulation, favoritism, and coercion that have influenced decisions ranging from children's education to family living arrangements. And as these layers are peeled back, Kody's composure cracks further, his voice occasionally rising, occasionally faltering, attempting explanations that seem to collide with the mounting proof. And each response is met with a mixture of skepticism and disbelief from the judge in the courtroom, creating an almost tangible friction that resonates through the room like static electricity. At one point, a document is presented that appears to show Kody approving transfers of money labeled as household expenses, but clearly intended for personal investments. And the prosecution highlights inconsistencies in record-keeping, questioning whether these acts. Robin clutches her chest as if to brace against a physical blow. Christine's hands tighten into fists as her jaw muscles strain. Janelle's lips press together as she leans back slightly, and Mary's eyes narrow, calculating the implications. Every word spoken, every paper produced, and every emotional reaction contributes to a mounting sense of urgency and suspense, creating an atmosphere where viewers, or in this case, readers imagining the scene, feel as if they are witnessing a ticking clock of emotional and legal tension, each second loaded with the possibility of a revelation that could tip the balance irrevocably. And yet, even in the midst of this storm, moments of vulnerability emerge. Robin quietly pleads for her children's safety. Christine reflects with quiet fury on past betrayals. Janelle considers the cost of speaking her truth. And Mary's calm demeanor occasionally slips to reveal the emotional toll of years spent navigating deception. The prosecution then calls a forensic accountant, who explains, in plain terms, the discrepancies and patterns in financial behavior that suggest favoritism and manipulation. Her voice steady, analytical, yet carrying a subtle undertone of shock at what she has uncovered. And as she lays out her findings, Kody's attempts at rationalization grow more strained, his breathing shallow, and the room seems to hold its collective breath, each participant acutely aware that the next revelation could alter everything. And in this heightened state, a document is suddenly introduced late in the afternoon, one that seems innocuous at first, yet contains emails between Kody and one of his wives discussing the concealment of information and strategies for maintaining family hierarchy. And as the prosecution reads it aloud, the shock is visible on every face, the air dense with disbelief, anger, and an almost physical sense of betrayal. You won't believe what happens next. A secret emerges that could change the entire course of this case forever. Tension escalates as Kody struggles to answer the mounting accusations. The room oscillates between silent disbelief and hushed whispers, and the emotional energy becomes almost unbearable as the wives wrestle with loyalty, anger, fear, and love, their faces etched with conflicting emotions, while the children watch in quiet. And as the gavel falls, the family and spectators alike feel a collective shiver of anticipation, knowing that the next session promises revelations, confrontations, and emotional upheaval that could change the course of the family and the courtroom forever. The courtroom reopens, the atmosphere heavier than ever, each creak of the door amplifying the tension that seems to hang like a thick fog over every person present. Kody sits rigidly, his hands resting tensely on the table, eyes starting briefly to Robin, whose fingers nervously twist a tissue in her lap, the faint quiver in her jaw betraying the anxiety that has been simmering under the surface. While Christine leans slightly forward, her sharp gaze flicking between the prosecution and Kody, as if daring him to falter under the scrutiny. And Janelle shifts uneasily, her posture stiff, one leg bouncing slightly, revealing her struggle to stay composed, while Mary sits quietly with a mask of calm that barely conceals the storm inside, her eyes fixed on Kody with a mixture of accusation and resignation. The judge clears his throat, his voice steady and commanding, calling the session to order, and the first witness, a former family assistant, steps up with a stack of documents clutched tightly, her hands trembling ever so slightly, and begins to recount the events that she observed, her tone cautious but firm, describing a pattern of favoritism and subtle coercion that had been taking place behind closed doors, highlighting how Kody's decisions, though portrayed publicly as fair and well-intentioned, had created tension, division, and confusion among the wives and children, with Robin visibly stiffening as she hears certain names and dates mentioned, the memory of private conversations she had long forgotten suddenly coming back with vivid clarity, while Christine bites the inside of her cheek, her knuckles white on the edge of the table, as the witness's words confirm suspicions she had harbored for years, and Janelle sits back, her mind racing with questions about her own involvement and the betrayal she may have overlooked. Mary maintaining a controlled expression, but her eyes betray a flicker of vindication and sorrow. The witness produces financial ledgers and text exchanges, each page and screen capture revealing small but significant discrepancies in reported expenses, childcare arrangements, and property allocations, painting a detailed picture of a family system that, while outwardly harmonious, had been carefully manipulated to maintain control. And as the prosecution lays out each piece of evidence, Kody's composure begins to crack subtly, a slight tightening around his eyes, a shallow breath escaping through his lips, and the gallery reacts with quiet murmurs, the weight of the revelations pressing down on everyone, the emotional intensity palpable in the charred silence between statements. Robin's voice shakes as she quietly whispers to herself, trying to process the implications for her children, her chest rising and falling rapidly with the effort to contain the surge of protective instinct and fear, while Christine leans forward, her tone low but sharp as she mutters pointed observations about Kody's contradictions. And Janelle's eyes start to marry, silently seeking validation, judgment, or perhaps solidarity. But Mary's face remains unreadable, calm on the surface, yet simmering with the complex mixture of hurt and realization that comes from years of navigating manipulation and partial truths. The judge asks Kody directly about his knowledge of specific financial decisions, the tone now heavier, each word deliberate. And Kody responds with careful phrasing, insisting that his choices were made with the best intentions, yet each explanation is immediately countered with documented evidence, creating a tension-filled rhythm of accusation, denial, and rebuttal that grips the courtroom like a taut wire ready to snap. And as Kody's voice wavers, a subtle tremor in his hand betrays his inner conflict, the weight of public scrutiny and personal guilt pressing down in equal measure, while Robin's lips quiver as she quietly pleads in her mind for the truth to align with her hopes for justice and protection for her family. Christine leans back for a moment, taking a slow breath, and then suddenly interrupts, her voice cutting through the procedural formalities, calling out inconsistencies she has noticed not only in Kody's testimony but in the presented documents, highlighting subtle manipulations and omissions, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and determination. And the courtroom collective intense, sensing the raw emotional force behind her words, each syllable a spark that could ignite further conflict. Janelle shifts slightly. The prosecution introduces a series of private messages between Kody and Christine, Kody and Janelle, and Kody and Robin, revealing subtle attempts to influence decisions, manage perceptions, and maintain control over certain narratives. And as the judge examines each document, his expression tightens, the weight of responsibility evident in every line of his face. While the wife's faces shift in tandem with each revelation, Robin's eyes widening in shock, Christine's jaw tightening, Janelle's lips pressing into a thin line, and Mary's gaze sharpening, a mixture of sorrow, anger, and vindication reflected in her expression. And the gallery murmurs quietly, the audience sensing the emotional and legal stakes reaching a boiling point. The witness then recounts a heated confrontation she observed between Kody and Robin, where private disagreements were manipulated to appear trivial, while underlying tensions and emotional coercion were evident. And the room seems to vibrate with the intensity of the memory, Robin's hands trembling as she grips the edge of the table, Christine leaning forward with sharp eyes, Janelle shifting uneasily, and Mary's calm mask threatening to crack under the weight of suppressed emotion. Suddenly, the door opens, and a new piece of evidence is brought to the judge's attention, a letter written by one of the children to an extended family member, detailing experiences that had long been kept secret, touching on favoritism, emotional neglect, and instances of manipulation. And as the judge reads it aloud, the air becomes electric with tension, every word echoing like thunder in the silent room. Kody's face pales, Robin gasps softly, Christine's fists clench, Janelle leans back with wide eyes, and Mary's gaze narrows, the collective emotional weight nearly overwhelming the courtroom. The judge pauses, his voice low but commanding, asking Kody to respond to the allegations raised in the letter. And Kody exhales slowly, his voice trembling as he insists that he has always acted in the family's best interest. Yet each word is met with a skeptical glance from Christine, a teary but resolute look from Robin, a watchful and cautious stare from Janelle, and an almost imperceptible smirk of vindication from Mary, as the emotional and legal stakes escalate further, creating a sense of mounting dread and anticipation. The prosecution introduces expert testimony from a family therapist who explains the psychological impact of favoritism and manipulation on children, describing in clinical yet empathetic terms how such dynamics can shape relationships, trust, and emotional stability. And as she speaks, the courtroom listens intently, the weight of her analysis amplifying the sense of moral and emotional crisis. Robin clutches her chest, Christine leans forward in disbelief, Janelle's lips press tightly together, and Mary's eyes glint with a mixture of recognition and sorrow, as all present grasp the profound implications for the children and the family structure. The session continues with dramatic pacing, alternating between intense confrontations and quieter emotional reflections. Kody attempting to defend decisions, the wives voicing subtle but piercing criticisms, and witnesses providing testimony that exposes layers of deception, emotional manipulation, and favoritism, each revelation building like waves crashing against the fragile shoreline of the family's public image and private reality. The emotional intensity escalates as the day progresses. Voices raise, tears are shed, and subtle gestures, a tightening of fists, a swallowed sob, a sharp intake of breath, reveal the deep personal stakes at play, while the judge maintains order but allows the tension to simmer, fully aware that the unfolding drama is both legally significant and emotionally devastating. Near the end of the session, a critical document is revealed, a financial ledger with hidden notes and annotations suggesting intentional misrepresentation of expenses and prioritization of some children's needs over others. And as the prosecution reads it aloud, Robin's eyes widen in shock, Christine's hands tighten into fists, Janelle leans forward in disbelief, and Mary finally allows a flicker of emotion to escape her composed exterior. You won't believe what happens next. A shocking confession is about to be revealed that will leave everyone in the courtroom stunned. The session closes with the judge announcing a brief recess, but the room remains tense, everyone acutely aware that the next minutes, the next words, and the next revelations could irreversibly alter the family's future, leaving viewers, or in this case, readers, on the edge of their seats, desperate to see what will happen when the courtroom reconvenes and the hidden truths finally come to light. The courtroom reopens to an almost unbearable tension, the faint hum of the overhead lights mingling with the anxious whispers of spectators, as Kody Brown sits stiffly at the table, hands pressed together, jaw tight, eyes flicking momentarily toward Robin, who sits with her fingers entwined and trembling slightly, her breathing shallow and rapid as she braces herself for the next wave of revelations. Christine leans forward, her sharp gaze cutting across the room, analyzing every subtle movement, every flinch, every hesitation, while Janelle shifts uneasily, her leg bouncing subtly under the table, betraying a mix of anxiety and dread. And Mary, seated with a seemingly calm composure, eyes Kody with a quiet intensity that belies the emotional storm building inside her, as if silently cataloging every misstep, every lie, every omission. The judge calls the session to order, his tone measured but carrying the weight of authority, and the prosecution immediately seizes the momentum, introducing the next witness, a former household manager who worked closely with the family and observed interactions that, when recounted, reveal the intricacies of power dynamics, favoritism, and subtle manipulation that have shaped the household for years. As the witness begins to speak, detailing specific incidents where certain children were given preferential treatment, allowances were manipulated, and emotional appeals were strategically used to influence decisions, Robin's eyes widen, a tear slipping down her cheek as she quietly whispers, "I can't believe this," while Christine leans forward, jaw tight, muttering under her breath, dissecting each word with calculated precision. Janelle's lips press into a thin line as she struggles to reconcile her own understanding of events with the damning testimony, and Mary's eyes glint with the recognition of truths long suspected but never confirmed. The witness produces photographs, schedules, and written correspondence, each item adding layers of evidence that suggest deliberate manipulation and preferential treatment, painting a vivid picture of a family system designed to protect certain members while marginalizing others. And as the prosecution narrates each piece, Kody shifts in his seat, a slight tremor in his hand betraying the internal tension he desperately tries to mask, while Robin's hands clutch the table, knuckles white, and Christine's piercing gaze seems to bore into every word, analyzing, calculating, judging. The judge interjects at intervals, asking clarifying questions, ensuring that the evidence is clearly understood, and the rhythm of courtroom exchanges becomes a tense dance of accusation, defense, and testimony, with emotional undercurrents surging through each exchange. Robin fighting to maintain composure, Christine alternating between searing indignation and reflective moments, Janelle grappling with inner conflict, and Mary maintaining a controlled exterior while her mind races with insights into the true scale of manipulation. A sudden revelation from the witness sends a shockwave through the room. Documents reveal financial transactions that were intentionally concealed, decisions made under false pretenses, and emotional coercion employed to sway compliance. And as each detail emerges, the wives' faces reflect a spectrum of emotions: Robin's tear-filled eyes, Christine's tight jaw and narrowed gaze, Janelle's tense posture, and Mary's unreadable yet intense stare, each reaction a mirror of the complex emotional landscape that has long defined the family. The prosecution then introduces private recordings of conversations, some innocuous at first, but gradually revealing subtle manipulations and coercive undertones. And as these recordings are played aloud, Kody's hands tighten, his jaw clenches, and his voice falters slightly during cross-examination, while the wives react variably, Robin recoiling slightly, Christine leaning forward with intensity, Janelle shifting uneasily, and Mary maintaining calm but with a sharp glint of acknowledgement in her eyes. The emotional intensity escalates as personal histories are intertwined with legal arguments, revealing a web of favoritism, secrecy, and selective disclosure that has affected decisions ranging from children's schooling to family finances, and the courtroom seems to pulse with the tension of decades of unresolved conflict. In one particularly harrowing exchange, the witness recounts a confrontation between Kody and Robin, where private disagreements were reframed publicly, coercive language subtly employed, and emotional manipulation used to maintain control, causing Robin to tremble slightly, Christine's fingers to drum impatiently on the table, Janelle lean back with wide eyes, and Mary to quietly observe, the room collectively holding its breath as the weight of truth presses down. A series of emails is then presented, each one demonstrating careful attempts to control narratives, manage perceptions, and influence outcomes in ways that prioritize certain individuals over others. And as the prosecution meticulously lays out the context and implications, the emotional toll on the family becomes increasingly evident. Robin clutching the edge of the table to steady himself, Christine leaning forward, voice tight with indignation, Janelle's gaze flicking between Kody and the evidence, and Mary's composed posture concealing the storm of validation and hurt within. The tension builds further as a new piece of evidence is introduced, a confidential journal entry from one of the children, revealing emotional neglect, favoritism, and the psychological impact of the family hierarchy. And as the judge reads portions aloud, the courtroom becomes almost oppressive with the weight of accumulated emotion and revelation, Kody's face paling slightly, Robin's breathing quickening, Christine's fists tightening, Janelle leaning forward, and Mary's eyes narrowing, absorbing each word with intense focus. The session shifts dynamically between heated confrontation and reflective silence, as Kody attempts to defend past decisions. Witnesses recount precise observations, and the wives respond both verbally and through subtle gestures, creating a dramatic ebb and flow of tension and emotion, while the prosecution continues to weave together the narrative of manipulation, favoritism, and concealed truths that has driven the family's dynamics for years. As the day progresses, another witness, a longtime family advisor, takes the stand, providing testimony that corroborates previous claims, highlighting patterns of coercion and preferential treatment, and offering insight into the emotional climate of the household. While Robin leans forward, visibly shaken, Christine's expression alternates between disbelief and anger. Janelle's eyes widen as connections are made, and Mary's calm exterior belies the intensity of her inner reflections. At one point, the advisor presents a set of financial spreadsheets, showing patterns that suggest intentional concealment and prioritization, and as these details are read aloud, the courtroom collectively shivers with the implications, Robin quietly gasping, Christine muttering under her breath, Janelle pressing her lips together, and Mary's eyes glinting with both sorrow and vindication. The emotional climax of the session arrives when the witness recounts a moment of confrontation between Kody and the children, highlighting the subtle psychological effects of favoritism and manipulation. And as the details unfold, Robin trembles with protective instinct, Christine leans forward, voice tight, Janelle shifts uncomfortably, and Mary's eyes narrow, absorbing every nuance. You won't believe what's about to happen. The next revelation will leave the courtroom in stunned silence and force the family to face truths they have long avoided. As the final moments of the session approach, the prosecution unveils a series of internal communications, revealing Kody's awareness of discrepancies, his attempts to rationalize and redirect responsibility, and the emotional weight of decisions that have long-term implications for every family member. While the wives' reactions oscillate between shock, grief, and righteous anger, each woman processing the revelations in her own way, and the courtroom seems to hold its collective breath as the day concludes, the gavel falling with a resounding echo, leaving the family, the witnesses, and anyone imagining the scene suspended in a state of tense anticipation, aware that the next session promises even deeper dives into betrayal, hidden truths, and the emotionally charged unraveling of a family whose public image masks a private storm, the cliffhanger hanging like a storm cloud ready to burst, ensuring that viewers or readers remain desperate to see what will happen when the courtroom reconvenes and the next chapter of Revelations unfolds. The courtroom reopens with a charged atmosphere that feels almost suffocating, the faint hum of fluorescent lights mingling with the subtle rustling of papers and quiet murmurs of anticipation, as Kody Brown sits rigidly at the table, his hands clenched together, jaw tight, and eyes darting briefly toward Robin, who sits with trembling fingers clasped tightly in her lap, her breathing shallow and uneven as she braces herself for the next wave of revelations, while Christine leans forward, her piercing gaze cutting across the room as she scrutinizes every movement, every hesitation, every subtle twitch of Kody's expression. And Janelle shifts nervously, her leg bouncing slightly under the table, betraying a mixture of anxiety, disbelief, and dread. While Mary sits with composed posture, yet her eyes glint with a quiet intensity that suggests the emotional storm brewing beneath the surface, a storm fueled by years of perceived manipulation and favoritism. As the judge calls the session to order, his voice calm yet commanding, slicing through the tension like a knife. And the prosecution immediately seizes the momentum, introducing the next witness, a former nanny who cared for the children and observed the subtle dynamics that have long remained hidden from public view. Her hands shaking slightly as she clutches a folder of notes and photographs and begins recounting incidents that reveal emotional favoritism, manipulation, and carefully constructed hierarchies within the household, detailing how certain children received preferential treatment while others were subtly marginalized. And as she speaks, Robin's eyes widen, tears welling up as memories resurface, while Christine's jaw tightens, a mixture of anger and vindication reflected in her sharp gaze. Janelle's posture stiffens as she silently contemplates the implications for her own position in the family, and Mary's calm exterior hides the intense validation and hurt she experiences as truths long suspected are confirmed. The witness produces photographs, schedules, forcing Kody to respond directly to allegations that span years, and Kody attempts measured explanations, insisting that his actions were motivated by love and concern for the family. Yet each response is immediately challenged by the mounting evidence, creating a tense rhythm of accusation, denial, and rebuttal that keeps the courtroom on edge, Robin trembling slightly as she listens, Christine's expression alternating between incredulity and focused scrutiny, Janelle leaning back, attempting to process the escalating tension, and Mary's eyes narrowing as she internalizes the implications for both past and present dynamics. The prosecution then introduces a series of text messages between Kody and the wives, revealing patterns of subtle manipulation, selective disclosure, and strategic emotional persuasion. And as each message is read aloud, Kody flinches imperceptibly. Robin gasps softly. Christine's hands tighten into fists. Janelle leans forward with a stunned expression, and Mary's calm demeanor belies the flood of recognition and restrained satisfaction that surges within her. The courtroom charged with anticipation as every word underscores the power dynamics that have long influenced the family structure. The emotional intensity escalates as the witness recounts a particularly heated confrontation between Kody and Robin, where private disagreements were reframed publicly to assert dominance, coercive language subtly employed, and emotional manipulation apparent in Kody's approach, causing Robin's lips to quiver and her hands to tighten, Christine to lean forward, voice barely restrained as she mutters cutting observations, Janelle shifting uncomfortably, and Mary watching with sharp focus, the tension in the room so thick it feels almost tangible. The prosecution then introduces a series of financial records and annotated spreadsheets, highlighting inconsistencies, hidden expenditures, and decisions that suggest favoritism and selective prioritization, each revelation drawing visible reactions from the wives. Robin's eyes widen in shock and distress. Christine's fists clench with anger and disbelief. Janelle leans forward, silently processing the implications, and Mary's eyes glint with calculated awareness, each document serving as a piece of the larger puzzle of control and manipulation. As the session continues, the witness provides insight into emotional and psychological impacts on the children, discussing how favoritism, selective attention, and covert manipulation have influenced their relationships, trust, and overall well-being. And the courtroom collectively absorbs this testimony, Robin trembling with protective instinct, Christine reflecting with sharp indignation, Janelle grappling with mixed emotions, and Mary maintaining a poised exterior while internally acknowledging the long-term consequences for the family. The pace of the session shifts dynamically, alternating between intense, emotionally charged confrontations and quieter, reflective moments. Kody struggling to justify his past actions, the wives responding both through subtle gestures and pointed observations, and the prosecution weaving together a compelling narrative of favoritism, secrecy, and concealed truths that have defined the moment, building suspense, emotional investment, and anticipation for the revelations yet to come. Suddenly, the witness introduces a set of private letters written by one of the children to a trusted relative, detailing instances of emotional neglect, favoritism, and the subtle psychological effects of living within the family hierarchy. And as the judge reads portions aloud, the room collectively holds its breath. Kody's face pales slightly, Robin's chest rises and falls rapidly, Christine's jaw tightens, Janelle's eyes widen, and Mary's gaze sharpens, the weight of decades of concealed truths crashing over everyone in the room. The session continues with Kody attempting to respond to these allegations, his voice wavering as he insists on good intentions, while the wives' reactions oscillate between disbelief, grief, anger, and cautious observation, each woman processing the revelations in her own unique way. Robin's tears silently streaking her cheeks, Christine's piercing gaze cutting through the tension, Janelle leaning forward with furrowed brows, and Mary's eyes reflecting both sorrow and the vindication of confirmed suspicions. The prosecution then calls an expert on family dynamics and child psychology to the stand, who explains in clear terms how favoritism and manipulation impact children's emotional development, relationships, and sense of fairness. And as the testimony unfolds, the courtroom listens with rapt attention, the emotional stakes rising to an almost unbearable level. Robin clutching her hands together, Christine's knuckles whitening, Janelle's breathing shallow, and Mary. The judge calls a brief recess, but the tension remains, palpable, as everyone senses that the next session promises even deeper, more personal revelations, forcing the family to confront the hidden dynamics, emotional manipulations, and favoritism that have long shaped their lives, leaving readers or viewers desperate to continue, suspended in a state of high emotional and narrative anticipation, knowing that the fallout from these revelations will resonate far beyond the walls of the courtroom.